Marcus Chun had always been the type of person who noticed when others were struggling. It was Tuesday afternoon at the Terran Diplomatic Station, orbiting the neutral moon of Kepler 442c, and the cafeteria buzzed with the usual mix of human diplomats, translators, and support staff. The air recyclers hummed their familiar tune, and the artificial gravity felt just a bit lighter than Earth normal, giving everyone's movements a slight bounce. He sat alone at his usual corner table, unwrapping the peanut butter and jelly sandwich his wife Sarah had packed for him that morning. As a junior maintenance technician, Marcus didn't earn enough to afford the overpriced station food, so he brought lunch from their small quarters in the residential section. The sandwich wasn't much to look at, but Sarah always cut it diagonally the way he liked, and she'd even included a small packet of chips. That's when he noticed her. The elderly alien woman sat 3 tables away, her tall, willowy frame hunched over an empty tray. Her skin had a pale blue tint that seemed to shimmer under the artificial lights, and her white hair was pulled back in an elaborate braid that cascaded down her back like spun silver. She wore simple gray robes that looked worn and faded, quite different from the elaborate clothing most alien dignitaries sported when visiting the station. Marcus recognized her species as Valerian, though he'd never actually spoken to one before. They were known throughout the galaxy as an ancient and proud race, with lifespans that stretched across centuries. This particular Valerian looked tired, her large violet eyes staring blankly at the empty tray before her. Her 6-fingered hands trembled slightly as she reached into her robes, pulling out what appeared to be a small pouch. She shook it gently, and Marcus could see it was empty. The woman looked around the cafeteria with what Marcus could only describe as embarrassment. Her shoulders sagged as she slowly stood, preparing to leave without having eaten anything. Something about the sight tugged at Marcus's heart. He'd grown up poor on Earth, knew what it felt like to go hungry, and recognized the look of someone trying to maintain their dignity while their stomach growled. Without really thinking about it, Marcus stood up and walked over to her table. The Valerian woman looked up at him with surprise, her violet eyes wide. Up close, he could see the fine lines around her eyes, and the way her hands shook slightly, not from age, but from hunger. "Excuse me, ma'am," Marcus said gently, holding out his sandwich. "I couldn't help but notice you don't have any food. Would you like to share my lunch? It's not much, just peanut butter and jelly, but you're welcome to half of it." The woman stared at him for a long moment, her expression cycling through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been wonder. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality typical of her species, though it was softer than usual, almost whispered. "You would share your meal with a stranger?" she asked, tilting her head in a gesture that Marcus recognized as the Valerian equivalent of raising an eyebrow. "Of course," Marcus replied, sitting down across from her and carefully tearing his sandwich in half. "My grandmother always said there's no such thing as strangers, just friends you haven't met yet. And nobody should go hungry if someone else can help." The woman accepted the half sandwich with trembling hands, examining it with curiosity. "I am not familiar with this food," she admitted. "What is peanut butter and jelly?" Marcus smiled, happy to explain. "Peanut butter is made from ground peanuts, and jelly is made from fruit juice and sugar. It's pretty common on Earth, especially for kids. Nothing fancy, but it fills you up." She took a small bite, chewed thoughtfully, and then her eyes lit up with genuine pleasure. "This is delicious," she said, taking another bite. "The flavors complement each other beautifully. Your people are quite ingenious." As they ate together, Marcus learned that her name was Naya Veltar, and she was visiting the station on what she described as personal business. She didn't elaborate, but Marcus didn't pry. Instead, they talked about simple things: the view of the nebula from the observation deck, the challenges of living in artificial gravity, and the strange foods different species considered delicacies. When they finished eating, Naya stood slowly and bowed deeply, a formal gesture that seemed almost ceremonial. "Marcus Chan of Earth," she said solemnly, "you have shown me kindness when I needed it most. This debt will not be forgotten." Marcus waved off her formal tone with a laugh. It was just half a sandwich, ma'am. No debt needed. Just maybe pass the kindness along to someone else someday. Something flickered in Naya's violet eyes, something that might have been amusement or perhaps respect. Indeed, she murmured. Perhaps I shall do exactly that. As she walked away, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there had been something different about their encounter, something significant that he couldn't quite put his finger on. But he shrugged it off, gathered his trash, and headed back to work, unaware that his simple act of kindness had just changed the course of galactic history. 3 days after his encounter with Naya, Marcus was elbow-deep in the maintenance shaft of Level 7, trying to fix a stubborn ventilation unit that kept making grinding noises. The work was hot, cramped, and frustrating, but it kept his mind off the strange dreams he'd been having since meeting the elderly Valerian woman. Dreams filled with starships and vast councils of alien beings, all somehow connected to a simple peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Chun, report to the docking bay immediately, came the crackling voice through his communicator. It was his supervisor, Janet Rodriguez, and she sounded uncharacteristically nervous. Marcus pulled himself out of the shaft, wiping sweat and grease from his forehead. On my way, Chief. What's the situation? Just get down here, Marcus. And maybe clean yourself up a bit first. The urgency in her voice made Marcus hurry through a quick sonic shower and change into a clean maintenance uniform before heading to the docking bay. As the lift descended, he wondered what could be so important that Janet would pull him off a priority repair job. The docking bay buzzed with activity unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Normally, the station received maybe 1 or 2 alien vessels per week, usually small diplomatic shuttles or trade ships. Today, the massive bay was filled with spacecraft of a dozen different designs, their hulls gleaming with exotic materials and technologies that made human engineering look primitive by comparison. Station personnel scurried around like ants, some carrying ceremonial banners while others set up what appeared to be a formal reception area. Marcus spotted Captain Williams, the station commander, pacing near the main airlock while speaking rapidly into his communicator. The man looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Marcus," Janet called out, jogging over to him. Her usually calm demeanor had been replaced by something between excitement and panic. "Thank God you're here. We have a situation." "What kind of situation requires a maintenance tech?" Marcus asked, watching as a group of tall, crystalline beings emerged from one of the ships. The kind where an entire fleet of alien vessels shows up unannounced. "Asking specifically for you by name," Janet replied, checking her datapad with shaking hands. "According to our translators, representatives from over 50 different species have arrived, all claiming to be here for something called the Honor Gathering of Marcus Chen." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "That's impossible. I don't know any aliens, except—" His voice trailed off as he remembered Naya's formal bow and her words about debt. "Except what?" Janet pressed. Before Marcus could answer, a commotion near the main airlock drew their attention. The crowd of station personnel parted respectfully as a procession emerged from the largest of the docked ships. At its head walked a figure that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was Naya, but not as he had seen her before, gone with the simple gray robes and humble demeanor. Instead, she wore elaborate ceremonial armor that seemed to be made of liquid starlight, flowing and shifting with each step. Her silver hair was now adorned with a crown of crystalline structures that pulsed with inner light, and her violet eyes blazed with an authority that seemed to bend reality around her. Behind her walked beings that Marcus recognized from history texts and news reports. A Threnodai war marshal whose species hadn't been seen in human space for decades, a cluster of hive mind drones that represented trillions of consciousnesses, and a towering Krillian whose rocky hide was inscribed with honors from 1,000 battles. The procession stopped directly in front of Marcus, and every being in the docking bay fell silent. Naya stepped forward, her transformed presence making the air itself seem to thrum with power. "Marcus Chun of Earth," she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in his bones. I am Naya Veltar, first matriarch of the Valerian Empire, speaker for the Ancient Council, and guardian of the Stellar Concordat. 3 days ago, you showed kindness to one you believed to be a stranger in need. You offered sustenance without expectation of reward, treating an unknown elder with dignity and compassion. Marcus felt his knees go weak. The first matriarch of the Valerian Empire was essentially the most powerful individual in the known galaxy, commanding respect from species that had never bent to any authority. And he had given her half of his sandwich. "Your Majesty," he stammered, attempting an awkward bow. "I had no idea who you were. I just saw someone who looked hungry." "Precisely," Naya replied, and something like warmth crept back into her voice. "You saw not a title or a position of power, but simply another being in need. This is why we have come." She turned to address the growing crowd of humans and aliens filling the docking bay. For too long, the younger species have been judged by their capacity for war, their technological advancement, or their economic potential. But Marcus Chun has demonstrated something far more valuable: the instinctive compassion that marks a truly evolved civilization. A murmur ran through the assembled aliens, a sound of agreement that transcended language barriers. Marcus noticed that many of the species present had been hostile to humanity in the past, viewing humans as aggressive upstarts who had expanded too quickly into space. Furthermore, Naya continued, his actions have reminded me of why the ancient protocols were established. There exists among the elder species a compact, a promise made in the early days of galactic civilization. When a younger species demonstrates pure altruism toward an elder, that species earns the right to full membership in the Galactic Council. Captain Williams, who had been standing slack-jawed nearby, suddenly found his voice. "Your Majesty, are you saying that because Technician Chen shared his lunch, humanity is being offered full council membership?" Naya's laugh was like silver bells ringing across water. "Not offered, Captain Williams. Earned. The distinction is important." She turned back to Marcus, who was still trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. "Marcus Chun, by your simple act of kindness, you have elevated your entire species. Humanity will no longer be confined to the outer sectors or subject to the restrictions placed upon developing civilizations. You have proven that your people possess the moral foundation necessary for true galactic citizenship." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Trade restrictions lifted, access to advanced technologies, diplomatic immunity, representation in the body that governed trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. All because he had shared half a sandwich. "I don't understand," Marcus said weakly. "Why was this test necessary? Why the deception?" Naya's expression grew serious. "Because, young human, kindness shown in ignorance of reward is the only true kindness. Had you known who I was, your motivation would have been forever suspect. But you saw an elderly being in need and responded with your heart, not your ambition. This is the mark of a species ready to stand among the stars as equals." As the magnitude of the moment settled over everyone present, Marcus realized that his simple Tuesday lunch had just changed the future of humanity forever. The days following the revelation blurred together in a whirlwind of activity that left Marcus feeling like he was living in someone else's life. News crews from across human space descended on the station, all wanting to interview the maintenance worker who had accidentally secured humanity's place in the Galactic Council. Politicians arrived by the shipload, each trying to claim some connection to Marcus or his actions, while xenobiologists and diplomats scrambled to understand the implications of the ancient protocols. But it was the private conversation with Naya that truly opened Marcus's eyes to what his simple gesture had meant. They met in the station's observation lounge, away from the chaos of reporters and officials. Naya had returned to her simple gray robes, though Marcus now understood they were likely worth more than the entire station. Her crown was gone, replaced by the simple braid he remembered, but her violet eyes still held depths that spoke of eons of experience. "You seem troubled, Marcus Chun," she observed, settling gracefully into a chair designed for human proportions. Even in the awkward furniture, she managed to look regal. "It's just hard to believe," Marcus admitted, staring out at the nebula that painted the nearby system in shades of purple and gold. "One sandwich changed everything for my entire species. It doesn't seem real. Perhaps because you misunderstand what truly happened," Naya replied gently. "It was not the sandwich that elevated humanity, Marcus. It was the choice you made when you saw need and responded without thought of personal gain. The food was merely the vessel for your compassion." She paused, her gaze distant, as if looking across vast stretches of time. "Do you know how many species have failed the matriarch's test over the millennia? How many promising civilizations have encountered one of us in disguise and walked past without acknowledgement?" Marcus shook his head, suddenly feeling the weight of cosmic responsibility. 47 species in the last 1,000 years alone," Naya continued. "Some were technologically superior to humanity by centuries. Others had eliminated poverty, disease, even death itself. But when confronted with simple need, they calculated rather than responded. They saw potential advantage or disadvantage, but not another being deserving of basic kindness." The observation hit Marcus like a cold wave. What happened to those species? They remained where they were, confined to their local regions of space, never quite understanding why the galaxy seemed closed to them. Not as punishment, you understand, but because a species that cannot show basic compassion to strangers cannot be trusted with the power that comes with true galactic citizenship. Through the observation windows, Marcus watched as another ship arrived, its design unlike anything he'd seen before. Beings emerged that looked like living geometric patterns, their forms shifting between dimensions in ways that hurt to observe directly. "The Tesseract Collective," Naya noted, following his gaze. "They exist partially outside normal spacetime. They've been watching humanity for 3 of your centuries, waiting to see if you would pass the test. Their excitement at your success has been quite touching. Actually, they've composed what they call a gratitude symphony in 11 dimensions in your honor." Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling overwhelmed. "I just gave you half a sandwich because you looked hungry. I don't understand how that makes me special, or humanity special." "That is precisely what makes it special," Naya said with a smile that transformed her ancient features. "You are not claiming credit for conscious virtue or calculated goodness. You simply saw need and responded." "Do you know what you reminded me of, Marcus Chun?" "What?" "My own people long ago, when we were young, and the galaxy was vast and frightening. We too were tested by the species that came before us, though in a different way. A Valerian child became lost in the deep desert of our home world, and was found by beings so ancient that their names have been forgotten by time. They cared for her, fed her, protected her from the sandstorms, and asked nothing in return when they returned her to her people." Naya's eyes grew distant with memory. "That child grew up to become the first Valerian to reach the stars. The lesson of kindness received became kindness given across generations and across species. The ancient protocols exist because someone, somewhere, in the deep past, decided that compassion should be the currency of civilization." A new ship was arriving, this one massive beyond anything Marcus had seen, its hull seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. As he watched, beings emerged that looked like shadows given form, their presence somehow both comforting and alien. "The Umbral Consortium," Naya explained. "They rarely leave their home dimension, but they wanted to witness this moment personally. They say that your act of kindness created ripples across multiple realities, strengthening the bonds that hold civilized space together." Marcus felt a strange mixture of pride and terror. "What happens now? I mean, for humanity?" "Now your people take their place as full partners in the galactic community," Naya replied. "Your ships will be welcome in any system. Your researchers will have access to technologies that will seem like magic. Your philosophers and artists will join conversations that span multiple galaxies. Your children will grow up knowing that the universe is vast, but not empty of friends. She stood and moved to the window, her reflection ghost-like against the star field. But perhaps most importantly, your example will spread. Other young species will hear the story of Marcus Chun and his sandwich, and they will remember it when they encounter their own tests. Kindness breeds kindness. Marcus, your simple gesture has started a cascade that will echo through the ages. As if summoned by her words, Sarah appeared in the doorway of the observation lounge. Marcus's wife looked stunned and slightly overwhelmed, clutching a datapad that probably contained more interview requests and official summons. "Marcus," she said uncertainly, "there's a delegation here from Earth. The president wants to speak with you, and apparently every major university in human space wants to offer you honorary degrees. Also," she paused, looking bewildered, "someone from something called the Galactic Historical Archives want to preserve your lunchbox for posterity." Naya laughed, the sound bright and musical. "The universe has a sense of humor, it seems. Though I suspect future generations will find deep meaning in the preservation of the vessel that carried such consequential sustenance." She turned to Marcus one final time, her expression serious but kind. "Remember, Marcus Chun, that fame and recognition are temporary things. What you did in that cafeteria was eternal. Do not let the celebration change who you are at heart. The galaxy needs more humans like you, not fewer." As Naya prepared to leave, Marcus realized he had one more question. "Your Majesty, will I see you again?" "Oh yes," she replied with a smile that held mysteries and promises. "The Galactic Council meets monthly, and humanity will need a representative who understands what true leadership means. I suspect we will be working together for many years to come." With that, she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with his wife, and the knowledge that his life, and the life of every human in the galaxy, had been forever changed by the simple decision to share his lunch with a stranger in need. 6 months after the incident that changed everything, Marcus found himself standing in the great assembly hall of the Galactic Council, a structure so vast that it had its own weather systems. The hall existed in a pocket dimension specially created for the monthly gatherings, where representatives from thousands of species came together to govern an empire that spanned multiple galaxies. He still couldn't quite believe he was here. The human delegation had argued for weeks about who should represent their species in the council. Politicians had campaigned, diplomats had lobbied, and academics had written lengthy papers about qualifications and experience. In the end, it was Naya who had settled the matter with a simple statement. The one who earned humanity's seat should be the one to fill it. Now Marcus sat at the crystalline podium designated for humanity, wearing a formal diplomatic uniform that felt alien against his skin. Around him, beings of impossible variety debated matters that affected trillions of lives. Today's agenda included trade disputes between dimensions, the establishment of new hyperspace routes, and the delicate matter of first contact protocols for recently discovered civilizations. The chair recognizes the representative from Terra, announced the council's AI moderator, its voice somehow reaching every being in the vast space in their native language. Marcus stood, his heart pounding as thousands of eyes, sensory organs, and awareness fields focused on him. Even after 6 months, he sometimes forgot that he was no longer Marcus the maintenance tech, but Marcus the voice of humanity in galactic affairs. "Thank you, moderator," he began, his voice amplified across the hall. "I want to address the proposal regarding the Andromedae contact situation. The matter at hand involved a species the scouts had discovered in a distant galaxy, one that had just achieved interstellar flight but hadn't yet encountered other intelligent life. The debate had raged for hours about the proper approach: formal diplomatic contact, gradual technological uplift, or continued observation. I've listened to the arguments from the Krillian Empire about the benefits of immediate technological sharing," Marcus continued, "and I understand the Hive Collective's position that gradual introduction minimizes cultural shock. But I think we're missing something important." A ripple of attention moved through the assembly. In his short time on the council, Marcus had gained a reputation for unexpected insights, approaching problems from angles that centuries-old civilizations sometimes missed. Every species in this chamber has a story about their first contact with galactic civilization, Marcus said, his voice gaining strength as he found his rhythm. Some of those stories are beautiful, full of wonder and welcome. Others are tales of confusion, fear, or cultural disruption that took generations to heal from. He paused, making eye contact with representatives across the spectrum of alien life. But what if we could give them something better? What if their first contact wasn't with a ship or a formal delegation, but with simple kindness from a stranger? The Valerian section of the assembly stirred with interest. Marcus caught Naya's eye and saw her encouraging nod. I propose we implement what I'm calling the neighbor protocol, Marcus continued. Instead of grand reveals or careful technological exchanges, we start with individuals. A stranded ship that needs help with repairs. A scientific expedition that runs short on supplies. A medical emergency that requires assistance. The hull buzzed with discussion in dozens of languages and communication methods. The Tesseract Collective's geometric forms pulsed with rapid calculations, while the Umbral Consortium's shadow beings whispered among themselves in frequencies below human hearing. The goal isn't deception, Marcus clarified, but genuine interaction between individuals rather than governments. Let them see us as people first, beings who can offer help when needed, before they have to process the overwhelming reality of galactic civilization. A towering representative from the mineral quartz, whose species communicated through crystalline resonance, chimed a question that the translation system rendered as, "This human proposes to base first contact protocols on the same principles that elevated his own species. Is this not circular reasoning?" Maybe, Marcus admitted with a smile. But sometimes the best solutions are simple ones. If kindness between strangers was enough to prove humanity's readiness for galactic citizenship, maybe it's also the best way to welcome new species into that same community. The debate that followed was intense, but respectful. The Andromedae had technological capabilities that made them potentially valuable allies, but they also had cultural complexities that required delicate handling. Their species had evolved from hive insects, but had developed individual consciousness only recently, creating a society that was still learning to balance collective needs with personal identity. Over the course of several hours, Marcus found himself at the center of discussions that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. He debated the ethics of intervention with beings whose lifespans were measured in geological ages, discussed the practical logistics of covert assistance with species that existed partially outside normal space-time, and helped craft language for treaties that would govern interaction between fundamentally different forms of consciousness. It was exhausting and exhilarating, but also strangely familiar. The core of every debate came down to the same question he'd faced in the cafeteria. When you see someone in need, what do? When the vote was called, the neighbor protocol passed by an overwhelming margin. The Andromedae's first contact with galactic civilization would come not through formal channels, but through a carefully orchestrated coincidence where human explorers would provide assistance during a genuine emergency. Other species would observe and assist, but humanity would take the lead, guided by the same instincts that had led Marcus to offer half his sandwich to a stranger. As the session ended and representatives began filing out through dimensional portals and matter transporters, Naya approached Marcus at his podium. She moved with the same quiet grace he remembered from their first meeting, though now he understood the incredible power that grace concealed. "You spoke well today, Marcus Chun," she said. "The neighbor protocol will become a standard part of our first contact procedures, I suspect. Your people have a gift for seeing the personal within the political. I just keep thinking about what it would have been like if someone had treated humanity that way," Marcus replied, gathering his notes and diplomatic materials. "If our first contact had been with someone offering help instead of formal announcements and treaty negotiations." "Perhaps that is exactly what happened," Naya said thoughtfully. "Perhaps every act of kindness is a form of first contact, a chance to discover that the universe contains friends we simply haven't met yet." As they walked together toward the human delegation's transport portal, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed. He was no longer a maintenance worker fixing ventilation systems, but he was still, fundamentally, the same person who had seen someone in need and responded without calculation. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders he was still discovering, but it was also, he had learned, full of beings who understood that the greatest technology was compassion, and the most advanced civilization was one that remembered to share its lunch with strangers. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new species to meet, new problems to solve. But Marcus felt ready for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the most important decisions were the simplest ones, and that kindness, like energy, could neither be created nor destroyed, only pass from one being to another across the infinite reaches of space. 2 years had passed since Marcus Chen's simple act of kindness had transformed humanity's place in the galaxy, and the ripple effects continued to spread in ways no one could have predicted. The Neighbor Protocol had become a standard for first contact across 3 galaxies, with over a dozen species successfully integrated into galactic society through carefully orchestrated acts of mutual aid rather than formal diplomatic overtures. But it was the unexpected visitor to the Terran diplomatic station that truly demonstrated how far those ripples had traveled. Marcus was in his new office, reviewing reports from the latest Neighbor Protocol implementation when his assistant, a young diplomatic aide named Jennifer Park, burst through the door with barely controlled excitement. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, her tablet shaking in her hands. "There's a ship approaching the station, but it's not on any of our scheduled arrival lists. And, sir, the design is completely unknown. Our xenobiologists are saying it doesn't match any known technology in the galactic databases." Marcus looked up from his reports, feeling a familiar tingle of anticipation. In his experience, unscheduled arrivals often led to the most interesting developments. "Any attempt at communication?" "That's just it, sir. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, but they're only saying one thing over and over again." Jennifer paused, checking her tablet. "They're asking for Marcus Chun, the sandwich giver." The title had become something of a running joke in diplomatic circles, but Marcus had learned to take such things seriously. He closed his files and stood, straightening his diplomatic uniform. "Well then, I suppose we should go meet our mysterious visitors." The docking bay was already bustling with activity when Marcus arrived. The unknown vessel was unlike anything he'd ever seen, its hull seeming to be made of some kind of living metal that shifted and flowed like liquid mercury. Strange geometric patterns pulsed across its surface in colors that didn't quite exist in normal space, and the whole ship hummed with an energy that made the station's artificial gravity fluctuate slightly. Captain Williams, now promoted to station commander following his handling of the original crisis, met Marcus at the observation window. "I've never seen anything like it, Marcus. Our sensors can barely get a reading on the hull composition, and the energy signatures are off the charts. But here's the strange part, they're waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For permission to dock. Despite having technology that could probably disintegrate our entire station without breaking a sweat, they sent a polite request for docking clearance and asylum processing. Very formal, very proper. The airlock cycled open with a sound like singing crystal, and what emerged defied every category Marcus thought he understood about alien life. The beings were tall, perhaps 9 feet in height, but their forms seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. He could see them clearly, but also sense aspects of their existence that his mind couldn't quite process, like looking at a shadow cast by a 4-dimensional object. Their leader, if that's what it was, approached with movements that seemed to bend space around them. When they spoke, their voice came from everywhere and nowhere, harmonizing with itself in impossible ways. "I am Zuex Thaler, last curator of the Infinite Archive, speaker for the vanished realms, keeper of the final memory. I seek the one known as Marcus Chun, the sandwich giver, he who elevated his species through simple kindness." Marcus stepped forward, still feeling awed by the elaborate titles that seemed to follow him around the galaxy. "I'm Marcus Chun, and the sandwich thing, well, that's become bigger than I ever expected. Something that might have been amusement rippled across ZYX Thaler's multidimensional form. Indeed, your act has resonated across realities, Marcus Chun. We have come from a place beyond the rim of your known universe, guided by echoes of compassion that reached even into the dying spaces between dimensions. The being's form stabilized slightly, allowing Marcus to focus on what appeared to be their primary existence layer. My people were among the first to achieve true galactic civilization, millions of years before your species learned to make fire. We built wonders that span dimensions, created technologies that could reshape reality itself, and accumulated knowledge that filled entire galaxies. Marcus waited, sensing there was more to the story. But we became so focused on advancement, on achievement, on the grand gestures of civilization, that we forgot the small ones, Thaler continued, and there was something like sadness in their impossible voice. We stopped seeing individuals in need, stopped responding to simple requests for help. We calculated the efficiency of aid, the strategic value of kindness. We became perfect, and in doing so, we became empty. The other members of their group moved forward, and Marcus could see that despite their advanced nature, there was something diminished about them, like stars burning out. Our dimension is dying, Marcus Chun, not from war or disaster, but from a kind of spiritual entropy that set in when we stopped caring for strangers. We became so evolved that we evolved beyond the very qualities that had made evolution worthwhile. Williams stepped forward, his commander's training taking over. Are you requesting asylum? We are requesting something far more precious, ZYX Thaler replied. We wish to learn again how to perform simple kindness. We have observed your neighbor protocol, witnessed how your species has transformed first contact throughout 3 galaxies. But more than that, we have seen how individual acts of compassion have created cascades of positive change that span dimensions. They turn their complex form toward Marcus. We wish to start over, Marcus Chun, to set aside our advanced technologies and vast knowledge, and relearn what it means to help a stranger without expectation of reward. We believe your people can teach us this. The request was unprecedented. A species so advanced they existed partially outside reality itself, asking to learn basic kindness from humans. Marcus felt the weight of the moment, understanding that his response would affect not just these beings, but potentially entire dimensions. Of course, he said simply, anyone can learn kindness. It's never too late to start caring again. Something like relief washed over the assembled beings, and Marcus could have sworn he saw tears in dimensions he couldn't quite perceive. There's one more thing, ZYX Thaler said. We have brought gifts, technologies that could advance your species by millennia. But we offer them not as payment for your teaching, but as an expression of the gratitude we hope to learn to feel genuinely again. Naya appeared at Marcus's side, having arrived with her usual silent grace. She studied the dimensional beings with interest before speaking. The greatest gift, she said quietly, is not what you can give us, but what you can become. The galaxy needs beings who remember that power without compassion is merely sophisticated destruction. Over the following weeks, the most advanced beings in known existence began their education in basic kindness under human guidance. They learned to make sandwiches before they were allowed to demonstrate their reality-shaping technologies. They practiced simple conversations with station personnel before sharing their vast philosophical insights. They helped with basic maintenance tasks, gradually remembering the satisfaction that came from helping others without cosmic significance. And slowly, something changed in them. The diminished quality faded, replaced by something bright and vital that had been missing for eons. They laughed at simple jokes, showed genuine interest in mundane human concerns, and began to display the same curiosity about other species that had made their ancient civilization great. Marcus watched it all with the same wonder he'd felt that first day in the cafeteria, realizing that his simple act of sharing lunch had created a cascade that now reached across dimensions and back through time itself. The universe, it seemed, had an infinite capacity for surprise, and an even greater hunger for kindness. As he looked out at the stars from his office window, Marcus smiled at the thought that somewhere out there, other species were having their own small moments of choice, their own opportunities to show compassion to strangers. Each act added to the great web of kindness that held civilization together, proving again and again that the most advanced technology was an open heart, and the greatest achievement was helping someone who needed a friend. The sandwich had been consumed long ago, but its legacy would echo through dimensions forever.